Hi, it's Campbell Such. This is Mind Bite Thursday, your weekly dose of the human edge in technology. This week I presented at a Business Analyst Masterclass on the power of soft skills when you add them onto your domain knowledge and your technical knowledge to help you lead a long and successful career. And at the end of the session there was a question that came up that really stumped me, and it was, if you're dealing with someone who is exhibiting either little or no self-awareness, how do you broach that with them, and how do you help them to see that it's a challenge for them and to help them raise their self-awareness when they don't have any? And it's truly a challenge that I think a lot of us have. Being self-aware is really powerful in terms of being able to better manage yourself and better manage your interactions with other people. And so I wrestled with that one last night, and one of the things that came to me was something that might be useful and that might help you. And that is that we tend to look for meaning in everything that we do. So what happens is we see or observe something. It's usually visual, but it can come through our senses, through what we feel, through what we hear, taste, smell, and then we look to put meaning on it. So we look for a meaning for that thing that happened. And what happens, and the way we put meaning on things, is we tell ourselves a story. Now that happens like that, and we're most often not even aware of telling ourselves the story, but we end up getting the meaning. And once we get the meaning, once we've told ourselves that story, then we get a feeling, and we get a feeling that could be good or bad, positive or negative, strong or weak, and then we take an action. And depending on the feeling that we get, it's how likely we are to take an action, which could be, if it's really positive, to go, yes, fantastic, or worse is to commit some act or do something that you forever regret. So one of the things that I've found really useful is to observe things. And so, let me just back up a little bit. So what it actually means is that nothing is good or bad other than the meaning that we put on it. So things happen, and then we put some meaning on it, we tell ourselves a story, then we get a feeling, and then we take an action. And a classic example of this would be you're driving home after work, and a big black SUV, you've just got on the freeway, on the motorway, and the big black SUV goes past you. There's a young guy in his probably early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. He's on the phone talking, he's intent, not concentrating on what appears to be going on around him. Just as he gets up in front of you, he suddenly veers off the motorway, off the freeway, cuts you off. You have to brake hard, and then he scoots off up the nearest off ramp, and off he goes. What's your immediate reaction? Young guy, big car, on the phone, not interested in what's going on around him, suddenly pulls off in front of you, and you have to swerve, brake hard to avoid him. What's your feeling? Well, mine would be, and I tell you, it wouldn't be particularly positive. Dickhead, learn to drive, all that kind of thing, probably want to flip him the bird. What if you found out that what actually happened is he'd just left home, he was heading to an appointment, his wife who was heavily pregnant due to give birth shortly, had just called him. They'd had real complications in their pregnancy, and she said, "My waters have just broken, I'm in awful pain, massive contractions, and there's blood. You need to come and get me, we need to get to the hospital." He was on the phone to his wife in an emergency. He then looked and spotted the nearest exit, scooted across in front of you, and went off up the road to save his wife and get her to the hospital, pick his wife up and take her to the hospital. Now how do you feel? Did you go from feeling really negative to feeling like, yes, go, as opposed to wanting to flip them off the bird? And the difference in that is nothing changed in what actually happened. What changed was the story that you found out about it, the story that you heard, the meaning that you put on it. And the real power, and then you got an emotion which, instead of being really negative, was a positive one, like a supportive one, and your action may have been completely different. So the key here is we can choose what meaning we put on things. We can choose the story. And if you become aware of the story that you tell yourself from things that you become aware of and that you observe and see and feel and hear, then you can completely change it. And if you ask yourself the question, when you're starting to feel emotion that you're not comfortable with, what story did I tell myself that made this happen, or that made me feel like this? and then look at telling yourself a different story, because there's any number of possible stories. You don't often know what actually happened. We're just making something up for ourselves that fit the facts that as we see them. Try telling yourself a story that might be much more positive and help yourself. So ask yourself, what story could I tell myself that would help me rather than make me feel negative? Then the emotion may well change, and then it'll certainly change the way you take an action. So that's Mind Bite Thursday for this week. I hope that's made a difference, and I hope you think about how that might be something you could use and that you're open to trying it. If you do, I'd love to hear from you about how it's gone. That's Campbell Such, Mind Bite Thursday for this week. See ya.